Hi,
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good, good. Well, hello, everybody. Hello, everybody out there. Again, welcome to Tuesday Tips with that peer support couple. Hello, I'm Javier Bustos,
And I'm Kathy Bustos.
and welcome to another edition of Tuesday Tips. Thank you, everybody who's joining us live. And thank you to those of you who will watch the recorded version of this. We appreciate y'all tuning in. Tonight, we have a special guest with us on Tuesday Tips. We're very proud and honored that we have her with us tonight. And we would like to introduce to you to Shelley Jones, Executive Director of Survivors of Blue Suicide. How you doing, Shelley?
I'm doing very well, thank you. And I appreciate you having me on.
Great.
We're so excited to have you on and talk about survivors of blue suicide. We've been waiting a long time for an organization like this. And we just want to see if you could explain a little bit about survivors of blue suicide.
Absolutely. Survivors of Blue Suicide started with some talk amongst the line of duty death survivors through Concerns of Police Survivors. Several of the members that are on the national board started talking about it and trying to figure out a way on how they could help the families of officers who died by suicide. So the national board in January voted to help start the new organization, and hence Survivors of Blue Suicide Foundation was formed. It started with a founding committee that came up with the name, the mission, the vision, and all the core values. So we are moving along quickly. We have, on a daily basis, we get new survivors signing up with us. We are a nonprofit organization, and we will work with the families of the officers who die by suicide. We will be modeled after Concerns of Police Survivors. Whereas they handle line of duty deaths, we're going to handle the families of suicide. We are just getting started, obviously, but we have several survivors on board already, and we're very excited about the future of SBS.
That's fantastic. So basically, how did you get involved with SBS? What were you doing before Survivors of Blue Suicide came into existence?
Well, I was a law enforcement officer for 21 years. I retired an assistant chief in Columbia, Missouri in 2014. In 2014, upon retirement, I went to work for Concerns of Police Survivors. And I worked there for about 6 years. When they started talking about how they were going to help the families of the officers that died by suicide, another coworker of mine, Lori Putnam, indicated that she was interested in participating in helping them as well. So I submitted the proposal to the national board, and they approved it, and that's kind of how I got involved. And I hated leaving cops, but I was so excited that we were going to be able to provide the same services that cops provides, but to a different group of people. And having had a few of our virtual sessions with the survivors, I can tell you they are over the top excited that they're going to get some of the services provided by cops.
Well, that's fantastic. And, you know, for Kathy and I, we got to meet you when we came to Police Week in DC doing peer support for peer support services. And that's where we all started to get to know each other. So when we saw that SBS had formed and you were going to be involved with it, we were very excited, right, Kathy?
Exactly. And kind of what we would like for you to tell the people that are watching now and the people that will watch later is why Shelley Jones? What is your passion towards helping the families that have survived the loss of a loved one to suicide?
Well, I am obviously a retired police officer, as I indicated, and my heart will always be with law enforcement. I've really enjoyed working with the families of line of duty deaths. They were amazing. The survivors were amazing. But the one thing that I noticed while I was there, and Lori Putnam noticed it as well, because she took a lot of the phone calls, is that there was very little out there for the families of suicide. And they seem to be forgotten. And agencies don't know how to handle suicides. They don't know how to work with the families after it happens. And so Lori and I talked, and we really wanted to get this started to give them the support that they deserved and they need.
I agree wholeheartedly with what y'all are doing, the mission, because, you know, being support services at cops during police week, and you see the trauma and you feel the trauma for the families and everything. Well, when you're around survivors who's lost a law enforcement officer to suicide, that loss is the same. And that trauma and the emotion is the same. And we can feel it from them. So that's why we are so excited that SBS came into existence. And for us, it was a no-brainer that we wanted to jump on board and help as much as we could too as peer support. And we're very honored that we went through an extensive vetting process. Mm-hmm. I have to give blood to be on SBS, basically.
Yes, you do. Yes. And we take your firstborn too.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So if our son's watching, I know he's a state trooper, but I'm sorry, we're giving you up, Jeremy. But no, we went through an extensive vetting process, even though we had been involved with cops and support services, just because we wanted to be a part of it. And we're actually very, very impressed of the vetting process, because SBS wants to have the best people possible to be part of the organization.
And I know I am a survivor of blue suicide and a survivor of an attempted blue suicide. And also Javier is a survivor of blue suicide from his agency. And I've heard you speak at in some other meetings where you are also a survivor of blue suicide as a coworker.
Yes. I lost an officer to line of duty while I was at the police department, and I also lost an officer to suicide. And I got to say, our department handled it pretty well, but there was a significant difference in the way a line of duty death was handled and a suicide was handled. And, you know, I struggled with that for a lot of years, because I always recognized that the officer and the family made the sacrifice. The thing about suicides is that they're messy. Let's just be honest. They're messy, and there's very seldom just one cause that takes somebody to the point that they want to take their own life. But the trauma to the family is there. It's a different trauma than the line of duty death families suffer, but it's still trauma, and the families struggle with the whys. And the sad reality is they may never know. And coming to term with never understanding it is part of the process. So we are hoping to be able to help those families navigate some of those hurdles.
It is a difficult process. I know, of course, I went into law enforcement in the 90s, and I think that you were pretty similar in time frame. And in the 90s, suicide survivors were not recognized.
No.
The officer sacrifices were not recognized. And fortunately, we've come a long way towards changing that and changing the stigma of suicide, because we have recognized over our training that the grief is the same. The trauma is different, the loss is different, and there's a lot of unanswered questions, but the grief is the same. Mm-hmm. And the fact that we're finally getting to the point where we're recognizing the survivors and providing them services is a wonderful thing. And hopefully we can throw some prevention in there. I know that's not what SBS's main goal is, but prevention is ultimately what we would like to see.
Right. Yeah. The education definitely needs to get it out there to help our law enforcement family. When I talk about the family, I mean the officers and their families themselves, because it's all together. And what I also think is great that SBS is doing is they're going to make sure that the families have basically like a sanctuary. There's going to be camps for the kids and for the co-workers and for the surviving spouses,
National
and
conference.
then a national conference soon. And that's fantastic because I think anybody who belongs to basically a group that has suffered in tragedy, they want to be able to be with other people that get them and understand them, so they don't feel like they're isolated in their home communities.
That's the very essence.
Exactly.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Exactly. And that's our vision for the future is we want to have those retreats for each survivorship, very similar to what Concerns of Police Survivors does.
Right.
Because the one thing that they have learned, and one thing that cops, they do many things well, so don't misunderstand that. But one of the things that they do really well is they understand that the survivors understand survivors, and they're the best supporters that they could have for each other. And so we want to have those retreats. We want to have what I like to refer to as a mini National Police Week in the Midwest for the families, where they can go to a memorial service and a candlelight vigil, and when we'll have the National Survivors Conference for the families. We're very excited about that, and if COVID would just go away, we could really do a lot of good things. It's hindering everything in this country, but that is our hopes for the future is in 2021 is to have that memorial candlelight vigil. And we also want to start to work with agencies on handling the aftermath of the suicide. Like you said, we don't deal with the prevention side. We're all about prevention, so don't misunderstand that.
Right.
But there's a lot of really good organizations addressing prevention.
Right.
But there's very few that are taking care of the families in the aftermath. And eventually, we'll probably have some prevention training. It's just we want to get everything geared towards the survivors right now. And so, and like I said, we want to work with the agencies and remind them that these families are law enforcement. They're blue families, and we need to take care of them when this happens. And we can't forget them. We need to be there for the special occasions, the birthdays, the anniversaries, the graduations, because they lost their officer. They don't need to lose their family, and
Right.
And it's the families that can support them and help them get through this.
Right. And the beautiful thing about survivors of blue suicide is I know that we've lost personal friends to suicide, and many departments either choose not to or do not know how to properly recognize the officers. And I know that's a big part of what SVS wants to do, is to train the departments in how to recognize an officer that is lost to suicide and honor their families in an appropriate manner. We've heard many horror stories about how suicides are handled within police departments, and hopefully that's something that we can do in training and in education, is that yes, they may not be a traditional line of duty death, but was their death a result of their service to the country and the community and the department? And how can we honor that in a way that's respectable to them and to the family?
Exactly. And those families paid the price too. Being a law enforcement family, that's not easy. You miss the holidays, you miss a lot of special occasions, and a lot of people stay up late at night wondering if their officer's going to come home. And those are sacrifices that they make. So we don't want to forget that. And the cumulative stress that the officers go through, and with what's going on in the world today, it's even harder. And it's all a contributing factor a lot of times to the officer suicide. And so we can't forget the families. We have to take care of them.
Right. We know you've done a lot of these interviews over since SBS started. What is one thing that you haven't been asked that you would like people to know about survivors of blue suicide?
One thing that we haven't been asked is you don't have to be an active duty officer. Um, we also work with the families of retirees. We currently only work with 1 year out of retirement, but I know that is something that we're going to address. We got feedback on that when we initially released the start of the organization, and we got feedback on that. And one of the reasons we didn't expand it is we didn't know how fast this was going to grow, and we were concerned about being able to control the growth and making sure that we were providing quality services. And so I think we're at a point that we'll probably take a look at that, have our national board take a look at that, and see if we want to expand that beyond a year past retirement. So that is one of the things that we've not been asked is about the retirees. So
I know you have a long list of things to accomplish. So that's one of the things that's on your list.
Right. And I know something that's on your list currently is basically, honoring, having the gathering like Police Week, and y'all want to have that gathering as well. And correct me if I'm wrong, but are y'all looking at the month of September possibly for this?
Yes, we're hoping that we want to have it in September, and we're hoping that COVID lets us have it in September. We really want to stick with September because of Suicide Prevention Month, and it seems to be when a lot of activities are occurring for families. So,
right, and I think, as you said, September. It's a fantastic idea to do it during that month because there's so many organizations that are non-law enforcement related that they also are about suicide, that I think that they would hopefully welcome SBS, because suicide, it hurts so many people in so many different walks of life, and they'll be able to understand SBS coming into Suicide Prevention Month in September, because we too are suffering just like their organizations as well.
Yes, absolutely.
So we like to ask all of our guests when we have them, what is your Tuesday tip for anybody watching this now or watching it later? What would you like for them to know? What piece of advice or information would you like to offer them for this Tuesday?
Well, I want to remind everyone, as I've said, that this is the Blue family. We are a Blue community, and we want to take care of our survivors. So my tip is to reach out to any law enforcement survivor that you know and let them know that they're not alone. Let them know that we are going to remember their officer and we are going to be there for them. And then take the time to go to our website, survivorsofbluesuicide.org, and register as either a survivor or as a supporter. Coworkers are very bad at recognizing that they're survivors, but they need to remember that they are also survivors, and we are there for them because they're there for the families. So we're going to be there for them.
Right. And I've also noticed on the social media, especially for SBS on Facebook, you already have separate groups set up for coworkers and for family. And I think that's great because they can go onto the Facebook page, find the group that relates to them, and hopefully go into the group and start the community.
Get support,
the
right.
Support in the community.
Support in the community of whichever group that you're involved in, whether you're a coworker. I know as it relates to concerns of police survivors, we had volunteered at Police Week for a couple of years before we even realized that we were survivors. It was It was Lori Putnam that inevitably told me that we were survivors of line of duty death from both of our departments and registered us at that point. So that's important that people take away from this tonight, is that if you're a coworker of someone who has died by suicide, please go to Survivors of Blue Suicide and register, because often the coworkers are the ones that are forgotten along with the families, but it's important that all of them are recognized when it comes to that.
Right.
Absolutely. We have the Facebook pages for the individual survivorships, and we vet everyone that goes in. And then we also do some virtual events because we can't do anything in person. We do the virtual events.
Right.
And if you go to our website, it has all the dates and what we'll be talking about. So,
And I think we're doing the one in December, and we're having an ugly sweater contest.
Oh,
So
God.
we're excited about that one.
You can't have a December meeting without an ugly sweater.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Javier.
Do we have any questions, or has anybody asked any questions?
No,
If anybody
no.
that's watching would like to ask.
I know there's one super fan named Missy, who is really excited that Shelley is on Tuesday Tips with us.
Yeah.
And Lori Putnam, she included the website for survivors of blue suicide. Thank you, Lori, for doing that. And hello, Sheriff Bittner and Aztec Mornster. Good to see you. And, Steve Piper, good to see you, Steve. Steve is in the Chicago area doing great things. So thank you, Steve, and thank you for tuning in. And, I think, Shelley, sometimes it's like, we're all so busy, and we're busy right now working together, getting SBS off the ground and everything, is that we forget that there's already reaching of a lot of people out there across
Yes.
the nation learning about SBS, which is fantastic,
It
because that's
is.
what we want.
Social media has its good and its bad. But I tell you, when you want to get the word out, social media is amazing because you reach people you would never have reached 30 years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
So
It has, fortunately for us, it's had more positive than it's had negatives, but I know that there are negative aspects to it, especially during a political season.
Right. So Shelley, thank you so much for coming on Tuesday Tips. We appreciate you giving us all the updates about SBS. Even though we're, as Lori calls us, we're wellies, we're part of the wellness support staff. We wish SBS, so much success, and we're happy to be on the ground floor with you, making this organization a great organization, because that's what we all want ultimately, and to serve the community.
we are so thrilled that you guys are on board with this. You bring an element that no one else can. So thank you.
Well,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well,
And thank you for joining us tonight.
Right. And Mom, I know your mom's watching. So Mom, you get your daughter back in just a little bit. Okay. So thank you, Shelley. You have a great evening, and
Hey, thank you.
hopefully we'll get to see each other in person again one day after this whole COVID thing's over.
We will. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.